Hey guys, how's it going? So this is actually a separate video I decided to do on Tales of the Jedi, because originally I was going to attach it to the end of the next vlog, and then it just became this whole other animal and just its own video. So that's what we're doing here instead, and with all of that, let's talk about this series. And this, of course, has just been so special of a release. It was the one panel we skipped at Star Wars Celebration Anaheim, and that's okay, because now we were able to, of course, enjoy it in its entirety. All 6 shorts now available on Disney+. And guys, this is basically an extension of the Clone Wars. Not a day goes by when new Star Wars animation drops from Lucasfilm in the same animation style that the Clone Wars started with, that I'm just amazed at how far we have come. I was not a fan of Star Wars Rebels. I only liked parts of it, and I still hold strong to that. I know that is going to offend a lot of people, but that being said, to go from that Disney XD series to just having a complete 180 back to the Clone Wars, being able to complete the final season that we never thought we would see, the most amazing piece of Star Wars in its final 4, to then an entire Bad Batch series being greenlit to be the continuation spin-off series of the Clone Wars, to now even extra shorts being funded by Disney and produced with Dave Filoni's approval. I mean, I'm like, hello? Hello? Is this real? It's just, man, I as a Clone Wars fan, it felt like we diverged into the darkest timeline for so many years, and to just have a complete 180 occur has just been so amazing. So anyway, with all of that, the first short with Ahsoka and her native village on Shili, and getting to see her mother voiced by Janina Gavankar was so cool. To see Ahsoka's father, and also just baby Ahsoka as she, using the Force, tames this giant predator, this giant beast, which looks so cool, and the animation is so unbelievably good. I mean, the forest looks so real, and it's animated, it's beautiful, it's stunning. It was just an absolutely magical episode, just a great 20 minutes there, but also, of course, 3 of the most phenomenal episodes that we're able to see is younger Count Dooku with his very young apprentice Qui-Gon Jinn, voiced by Liam Neeson's son, actually, and it's so good. The episode is amazing in highlighting the direct impacts of the policies of the corrupt senators that, as Count Dooku would say, led the Republic into decadence. And finally, after so many years, Count Dooku begins to build resentment for the Jedi Order. Some of this does kind of contradict what happens in Dooku Jedi Lost, because a lot of why he leaves also has to do with, you know, kind of his homeworld and Sereno, and in this, it's kind of, that all is kind of taking a backseat. I'm not really sure if it's still necessarily canon anymore, but still, a phenomenal episode with phenomenal new tracks by the Kiner family. I mean, they're just amazing. Kevin Kiner and the Kiner brothers are just so talented, and that only continues into the second episode when Dooku and Windu are investigating a murder on Raxus, which is obviously so foreboding of what's to come. That, of course, becomes the Separatist capital world, and that's where Dooku declares the Clone Wars in canon. And so to see that direct connection kind of created right there was so cool. But then the episode after that with Yaddle, of course, this is when Dooku has finally at some point been approached already by Darth Sidious, and we have entered kind of like the time period just before the Phantom Menace, then during, and then just a little after, toward the end of the movie, as all these events are taking place, because we get to see Dooku, I guess after already having arranged the assassination of Sifo Dyas with the Pikes and with Sidious, he has now entered the Jedi archives, and as alluded to in Attack of the Clones, we actually finally get to see in animation Dooku erasing Kamino from the archives, which was so cool. And I mean, man, after that, getting to see an interstitial scene of Qui-Gon about to get into an elevator in the halls of the Jedi Temple, and Dooku's final conversation with him, and kind of this foreboding conversation of him being so concerned for Qui-Gon now that he had had direct contact with a Sith Lord the first time in 1,000 years, and he said that Obi-Wan would be there to obviously fill that role now, but it wasn't ultimately enough. Maul was there on a mission, kill Qui-Gon Jinn, as alluded to in the Darth Plagueis novel now, and hopefully to prevent the Chosen One from being trained, and that obviously didn't work out quite as Palpatine and Plagueis ultimately wanted, but man, the incredibly powerful score that kicks in as we get to see some of the most amazing vistas of Coruscant that we have seen since Revenge of the Sith. And then the performance by Corey Burton all throughout this was so amazing, because now he's in the works, he's with Palpatine, you've gone too far, we're getting to see them meet, and then Yaddle enters the room and you know that she is not walking back out. And of course, I thought that Bryce Dallas Howard didn't quite sound old enough to be playing Yaddle, since Yaddle's kind of like in her 400s. I think that somebody a little bit more elderly sounding would have been slightly better, but Bryce Dallas Howard was good. I mean, this is only a brief appearance, right? But this episode, in the most grim fashion, explains why Yaddle is not there in Attack of the Clones and onward. She was killed by Dooku in this amazingly emotional and dramatic and so well performed scene between Corey Burton and Bryce Dallas Howard, and also Ian McDiarmid himself voicing Palpatine even in this now. Man, where was he for the Clone Wars? I wish he was there for the Clone Wars series, but that's okay. That was obviously a lot more voice work, where he's just kind of more so been doing just random appearances here or there, which is much more easy, I think, for him to do. But that being said, a phenomenal, grim yet empowering episode as Yaddle lifts the door up before being killed, ultimately shining light on the dark side one last time before being cut down. And oh my god. That being said, the final two episodes, especially Practice Makes Perfect, this was really heavy, I think, for any Clone Wars fan. There are some continuity issues in there as far as their appearances, I think, because this is supposed to be like between season 2 and season 3. So Anakin goes from the short hair, and Obi-Wan also has the short hair, to suddenly, before season 3, he's got the long Attack of the Clones mullet again. Anakin's hair is like a little shorter again for some reason, and then in season 3, Anakin's hair is longer, Obi-Wan's is back to being short. So this episode created some continuity questions for what occurs between the Clone Wars season 2 and 3 and how much time is actually there. But that being said, I loved this episode so much, because as so many of you probably took away right away from just watching it, this, of course, is the episode that directly sets up exactly how Anakin Skywalker inadvertently trained Ahsoka to survive Order 66 and the events of Revenge of the Sith. So emotional and just so bittersweet, because as we continue to be gifted with phenomenal new pieces of Star Wars animation like this, and especially glimpses back into the Clone Wars after the Clone Wars has already ended and we've all processed and moved on finally, to get this tiny little sliver, this tiny little piece of an episode, this transitionary episode between seasons of a moment we never got to see, of Anakin and Ahsoka bonding with the clones as he trains her to be better than your average Jedi, to survive an extraordinary situation like that. And as they throw in the little dig of Jesse being the one who is also in the room helping to train Ahsoka in this highly repetitive sequence that she seems to go through for at least the better part of a year training with the clones, as we see them transition to the Phase 2 armor as well, is just something that I could not believe we got to see, and something I don't take for granted, because you just never know when it's going to be the last time that we get to see Matt Lanter, James Arnold Taylor, and Ashley Eckstein and D. Bradley Baker voicing these characters. And they all had such a big impact on me and millions of other Star Wars fans of an entire generation with the work they did in that series with Dave Filoni and George Lucas and everybody involved. And so to just be offered this brief little 13-minute continuation means so much. And also Caleb Doom and Depa Billaba were in there, so that was really cool. The last Tales of the Jedi episode, Resolve. I really wanted to talk about this because, I mean, man, this was so cool. And I know it's really also controversial. For anybody who read the 2016 Ahsoka novel by E.K. Johnston, this episode, and I read it back then, or I listened to the audiobook narrated by Ashley Eckstein herself at the time, this episode writes over a lot of it. They don't specify if they're on Raeda. There are a lot of characters missing, characters unnamed, little situations changed, and I don't really subscribe to the idea of like, well, it's still the same in broad strokes, so the canon is still preserved. That's not true. Obviously, the book has been written over here. It's already happened before with the Bad Batch, for example, writing over the Kanan comics, and several other examples already as of late, and I mean, what can you do? Star Wars live action and animation takes precedence over any books or comics, and that is what has been made very clear here with the canon, and that, yeah, ultimately books and comics can be made no longer canon. But as we saw in the official trailer for Tales of the Jedi, Ahsoka has now been retconned into the funeral scene at the end of Revenge of the Sith, Padme's funeral on Naboo. It's now fully recreated in animation here with an incredible piece that sounds very similar to the Padme's Destiny and Birth of the Twins track that was used for that sequence in the movie. And so to see Ahsoka so perfectly inserted into this incredibly iconic moment and dark moment in Star Wars that none of us will ever forget, to know that she was there and that Bail Organa and Mon Mothma were also there. Didn't see them in Revenge of the Sith in that scene either, so that was amazing. But then to see the rest of some of the palaces there on Theed, where so much history in Star Wars has happened. I mean, Naboo is kind of like second to Coruscant in many ways for just how much has gone down on that planet, giving rise to the Emperor himself, giving rise to Padme. I mean, Naboo is such a special planet, and to see Ahsoka walking the corridors alone, to be stopped by Bail Organa, and for her to kind of be so incredibly hopeless, to be tired of fighting, handing back the comlink that he offers her on the balcony. I mean, it was so dark, and then these shock troopers so deeply immersed in the effects of their inhibitor chips, trying to escort Bail Organa back to the ceremony and out of the restricted area of the palace. I mean, then for us to see Ahsoka on this planet, whether it's Raeda or not, and trying to hide her abilities, having to save villagers, very similar things from the book, but not quite the same, and then ultimately confronted by this Inquisitor with this wild costume once she's been ratted out. I mean, oh my god, did this Inquisitor look amazing? How incredible this moment was after the village has already been burned down and Ahsoka is facing off against this Inquisitor and not only seamlessly disarms him after another incredibly powerful swell of the music by the Kiners, but then she freaking decapitates him with his own double-bladed lightsaber. Just incredible. Just one small criticism that I would like to insert here, in addition, obviously, so much of the novel being retconned, which honestly doesn't bother me so much. I wasn't really a fan of the novel myself. I wanted to see Ahsoka, like she does do in the novel, take those crystals from that Inquisitor's lightsaber and then purify them and binding them back to the light side again. That would have, I think, been the perfect and really memorable moment here. But unfortunately, it seems to have happened off-screen in Tales of the Jedi. Either way, Bail Organa comes to pick her up, and there are surviving villagers, and that is the end of Season 1 of this series. Now, closing thoughts that I really wanted to offer here for Tales of the Jedi, all of this was just so phenomenal. I do think the one episode with Mace Windu was a little weak. I wasn't the biggest fan of that one, but everything else was amazing here. It's just one thing, and I say this as a massive lifetime Clone Wars fan, of course, I would love to see other eras explored here. I would love to see Tales of the Jedi, with its incredibly general and broad title for the series, used to its benefit. Let's explore the original trilogy a bit. Let's explore the sequel trilogy a bit. God knows the sequel trilogy desperately needs the retcons and the additional information and the additions to story that just simply were not there at all in the movies or even the novelizations. So use this series to continue filling the gaps, but especially so where Star Wars really needs it. And as we start to get more into the High Republic era on screen with the Acolyte and also Star Wars Eclipse, if it happens, we can enter the High Republic era for this series. We can also go back further with the Old Republic era. Once we start entering the Old Republic era on screen too, Tales of the Jedi can build onto any era that the Jedi were around in. And I think that this series should be left open on Disney Plus to serve exactly that purpose. Guys, let me know what you think, and I'm gonna go ahead and wrap it there. Thank you so much for sticking around with me through all this time to talk Tales of the Jedi. I really wanted to make this video, and so it's been fun, and I will catch you next time. All right, take care, stay safe out there, and may the Force be with you. All right, keep creating. Bye-bye.